folks, good evening. We are going to start doing a little video series on rhetorical analysis, and today what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to quickly go over my definitions for rhetoric. As I try to articulate as often as possible, my definitions are not dogma. I just think that they are a good springboard to help kids kind of understand what rhetoric is in the 21st century. So instead of actually saying that rhetoric is using all available means of persuasion, which is what we typically see in textbooks, I try to simplify that so that kids have a basic foundation for how they only not have to understand what rhetoric is, but also write about it in the future. So, definition number one, rhetoric. I tell my students that rhetoric is using language to construct meaning. But I also tell them that language is not just words, it's anything concrete that will convey an abstraction. It can be colors, it can be images, it can be items, it can be hand gestures. If there's something concrete that conveys a deeper meaning that's abstract, therefore we have a rhetorical element. And at that point, kids don't think that rhetoric only happens with politicians and in commercials. They realize it's part of everyday life. And I'll look at them and I'll give them a good thumbs up, and they'll understand what I mean. It's a concrete thumb, but it means, hey, good job in understanding. Now, once they have the foundational understanding of my definition of rhetoric, we'll get into rhetorical devices, rhetorical strategies, and purpose. So, I do think it's important to delineate the difference between rhetorical devices and rhetorical strategies. They are not synonymous, and that's actually proven just by the words themselves. If I were to ask you to list out devices that you use in your house, you're going to tell me a bunch of nouns. If I ask you for a bunch of strategies of how you do common household things, you're going to give me a bunch of verbs, and essentially that's the difference. So, my definition for a rhetorical device is anything at all that a speaker uses to construct meaning. My definition for a rhetorical strategy or a rhetorical choice, I will use those synonymously, is anything a speaker does to construct meaning. And you'll notice that this all correlates with using language to construct meaning. So my kids know that when they think about rhetoric and when they write about rhetoric, there has to always be something concrete with something abstract. And the reason why we do this is because I have to make sure that they know that verbs are where the meaning is found. So let me give you an example here. I'm going to pull out my wedding ring. I'll put this right up to the camera here so you can see how much of a geek I am. If you can actually see that, you'll notice it is indeed the Lord of the Rings element there. I would do that with my wedding ring. But anyway, that's beside the point. If I were to walk into a room and I were to use my wedding ring, this is why we don't want kids to use the word use when they write. I could use my wedding ring by tossing it up in the air. I could use my wedding ring by spinning it around on my pointer finger. I could use my wedding ring for a magic trick, you know, voila. Oh wait, it's right here. I could pull it out of my ear. I'm using my wedding ring. However, it's not conveying any meaning at all. My wedding ring will convey meaning though, once I actually wear it. So the way that rhetoric works here with my definitions is the rhetorical strategy is the wearing, the device is the ring, and then the meaning is that I'm married. So those are the definitions that I use. So Tim Freitas wears his wedding ring to convey that he's married. And that's really how simple it can be. And you can do this with anything at all, okay? So a lot of times kids like to say a speaker uses a simile or something along those lines. Well, I tell my students, let's turn that into a verb. If it's a simile, then it is going to either compare or contrast. So I'd rather them say the speaker compares what with what. And then I would say, good, now put in order to. I need to know why. So let me give you an example of how this works. Oh, no, wait. Before I do, let me define purpose for you. Because I'll say, what's the purpose of that simile if we see something like that? Purpose for my students is what the audience is supposed to both understand and do after experiencing a text. Now, what that means is this. I am neglecting this idea that purpose is to entertain, to aesthetically please, and those sorts of moments. However, I put that in the do category because truthfully, if the purpose of something is to aesthetically please, then my body has to respond in a certain way to be fond of that. So therefore, it's still doing something. If I'm entertained, my body is responding in a certain way in order to bring out those positive emotions. Therefore, I'm doing something. So anyway, go back to my example with the simile. Let's just say that I had a simile in a book that said Billy Joe was like a snake. Now, if that's the case, and I say to my student, what's the purpose of that simile? or what's the effect of that simile, my student will say to me, oh, okay, the speaker compares Billy Joe to a snake in order to highlight his sneaky and deceptive character, moving the audience to know that something negative is most likely going to happen in the text later on. I think that sounds a lot better than, the speaker uses a simile in order to highlight the shady character of Billy Joe. Okay? So that's how I do things. That's why I explain things the way I do. We can actually check this out in writing a little bit later. But please note, when my kids do write their topic sentences or when they write their thesis statements, they always have to have what the author is doing with what the author is intending to have his or her purpose be. And at that point, we've got the concrete, we've got the abstract, and when those are actually always together, we know we have something rhetorical going on. As always, by all means, please feel free to leave a comment down below if you have any questions about this. If you disagree, that's okay too. This is not dogma. Please visit the website if you want. Please also consider sponsoring on Patreon, but also, as I always say, you don't have to if you don't want to, though we'd appreciate it because these videos are free as well. So you have a great day, and we'll do part 2 and part 3 and part 4 and part 5. Right now I've got 5 parts for this rhetorical series. Next, we'll talk about annotations, we'll talk about purpose, and we'll talk about finding these things as well. And we'll also look at writing with them with templates. And I'm willing to explain anything that you all want. You just have to tell me. Have a great night.